Hey YouTube, Warbles on a lot here, getting ready for The Outsiders on the 8th of February 2015. Again, it'll be a two-part broadcast.
Time now for Outsiders. I'm Barry Cassidy and you're not.
Thanks, Barry. Now time for Outsiders, where we gather round the Sunday extra breakfast table, smell the coffee beans, break bread and share the collective wisdom. But I really do hope that our Outsiders have had at least one coffee already, because we have some fast unfolding events to discuss. Our Outsiders today are Catherine Murphy, Deputy Political Editor with The Guardian Australia, Dr. Mark Triffett, former Director of Strategic Communications for the Business Council of Australia, and Michelle Griffin, State News Editor with The Age. The Leadership Spill, it's on.
The last thing Australia needs right now is instability and uncertainty. On reflection and after talking to my colleagues, I've decided that the best thing we can do is deal with the spill motion as quickly as possible and put it behind us. Accordingly, I've asked the Whip, Mr Philip Ruddock, to convene a party room meeting at 9 o'clock on Monday morning to deal with this matter.
That's Tony Abbott, PM, speaking moments ago, pushing forward the party meeting from Tuesday back to 9 a.m. tomorrow. And before we talk about that, let's hear this morning Communications Minister broke his silence.
Cabinet ministers are all expected to support the Prime Minister on a spill motion.
So you will?
Well, of course. Look, can I just say this to you? I know people keep on saying to me every day, they say, do you support the Prime Minister? Do you support the Prime Minister? I'm in the Cabinet. Of course I support the Prime Minister. Everyone supports the Prime Minister.
But what will Turnbull do if the spill motion passes in that party room meeting tomorrow morning and there is an actual vote on the leadership team? As we've just been hearing, the PM has just shifted that party room meeting from Tuesday back to Monday 9 a.m. So what is happening as we speak this Sunday morning? What will happen on Monday? And whatever the result, will it actually solve the Liberal Party's problems? Catherine Murphy, why has Tony Abbott shifted the party room meeting back to 9 a.m. Monday morning?
Okay, well, leaders have one sort of lever of control in these situations, and that's the timing of when a ballot takes place. I think Abbott's decision to bring the ballot forward, well, first of all, I'm not surprised about it. Second of all, it obviously reflects the fact that the Prime Minister believes himself to be in trouble, and if MPs are allowed to gather in Canberra and have a conversation for another 24 hours, then that could be a decisive development and not in his favour. So essentially he's brought it forward because he's made a judgment that bringing it forward maximises his chances of survival. He may be right, but it's the great test, I suppose, of the next 24 hours is whether there's a genuine stampede on. And if there's a stampede on, then the timing of the ballot doesn't, well, at least in recent history, make a great deal of difference. Julia Gillard did something similar and it didn't save her from Kevin Rudd.
Michelle Griffin, is this a genuine backbenchers revolt, or is someone much further up the food chain pulling the strings?
This is where, as a true outsider, I say, I don't know, but I can't believe that it would be purely backbencher driven and there wouldn't be nods, winks, phone calls, consultations, people further up with greater opportunities for much better advantage who aren't involved in all of this, because they always are. I mean, this has to be, you know, the usual, for all they say it's not Game of Thrones and it's ridiculous, some of the bloodletting imagery that's being used. It is the usual game of chess and you don't just play it with pawns.
Mark Triffett, what do you make of Malcolm Turnbull's assertion just this morning? It was a doorstop with News 24, ABC News 24, that he will not vote to have a spill. And of course, Bishop made the same pronouncement on Friday. What does this mean? Where are they at, do you think?
I think they're into a position now where they're thinking about what happens after Monday. And from what I can read from what Malcolm Turnbull was saying, even though he was reasonably categorically saying that he wasn't going to be part of the spill process, that he was appealing to the grassroots, both within the party, but also within the parliamentary wing, but also within the party, which I think reflects a general grassroots revolt at a public level that's being reflected in the party more generally. So he's playing a longer game, but I think a lot of the semantics that he was getting into was about appealing to people beyond the supporters that are out there supporting Tony Abbott at the moment.
Catherine Murphy, what do you think Turnbull is doing right now? What is Bishop doing right now?
Well, I think that there'll be a lot of conversations with colleagues. There's already been a lot of conversations with colleagues over the last few days. Obviously, the advantage of an additional 24 hours has been removed. So everybody will be trying to test where blocks of numbers are right now and run various scenarios in their mind as to what's their strongest pitch, what's their strongest suit. But obviously these situations are always very fast moving, highly fluid. People make decisions. I think, was it Robert McClelland who famously made a decision to vote for Mark Latham in the shower? These things are always incredibly hard to predict. In terms of is this a genuine backbench revolt? Well, my calls over the last days as I've been tuning back into the political year suggested it genuinely is. But that's a sort of, but basically backbenchers in politics are obviously closest to the polity. Walking around on a lengthy Christmas holiday this year, I've really been struck with how unpopular Tony Abbott is. It's really quite remarkable. Generally, leaders like Tony Abbott are quite polarising figures. People love them or they loathe them, but the electorate seems to have sunk into some sort of surly rejection of Tony Abbott. The backbenchers are closest to the action in relation to that trend. What's happening at the moment reflects a judgment that the voters have given up on Tony Abbott and a lack of confidence that Tony Abbott can dig in, be contrite, reposition, repackage and go forward in a more authentic and connected way. Tony Abbott's prime ministership for the moment has been a lot about delivering full vested interests and not a lot of connecting with actual voters who put him there. So I know there's been a lot of discussion about trends and do we have disposable leaders and is the electorate volatile and all of those sorts of things. But the reality is this is very much the sum of its parts, and predicting how it ends, though, well, I'm not in the crystal ball business.
So we'll have to watch this space. Michelle, what do you think Australians would like to see come out of this challenge? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. Like we've just been hearing from Catherine, you'd need a crystal ball to know what's going to actually happen.
You know, I actually think that a lot of the negative responses came after the budget and after people learned about what was on the agenda. And I think ultimately what people would like to see is some coherent, compassionate and considered revamp of policy, dare I say, regardless of whether it's Malcolm or Tony or Julie or, Fred or whatever. I think they would also like to see it not happen constantly. But I do think that part of the message that Catherine and everyone is hearing and what we're seeing in the polls isn't just a personality thing. There are policies that are widely disliked and not trusted, and I think they would like to see a rethink and a reset of that.
Well, it's fascinating because the spill was precipitated by Luke Simpkins, who moved because of concerns he said he'd heard from his constituency. He said not since his party under Turnbull supported the Rudd government's emissions trading scheme had he received so much concern from the electorate. This would suggest Simpkins ain't no Turnbull fan. So if people are not Turnbull fans but still very upset with the way the Libs are doing in the polls, what sorts of choices do they have, Mark Triffett?
I think it raises a very interesting question, and we could have a whole discussion about this at another time, but the extent of distemper and distrust in the Australian electorate, I think, is profound and probably unprecedented. There was a survey, I think, done by the Australian National University last year released, which said that over the last 7 years, the number or percentage of people who believed there was any difference between the parties in terms of who was actually in government had gone from 70 to 40%. So you can only imagine what that percentage might be after this process. So, I mean, I think in answer to your question, what do Australians want? I think the danger is that they're just becoming disconnected and distrustful to the point that it doesn't really matter how this situation plays out or whether Tony Abbott lasts for another week and whether Malcolm takes over or Julia or even Kevin Rudd comes back. I mean, I think people are profoundly, profoundly disappointed, particularly the disappointment with this government because they were elected, if you remember, on two meta promises of good governance. One was not to breach trust and to say what they do and do what they say, and then came out with a budget that broke promises on a cosmic scale. And then secondly, they would act like adults and not have the sort of leadership instability which they, platformed their whole election campaign against the previous Labor government. And we're now going through the same process. So, we're watching a fast-moving, slow-moving car wreck, which we've seen, literally 18, previously, and we're probably going to see again. So, to me, this speaks to a general issue that, if Luke Simpson is getting that sort of vibe, then it's not just from the right of the Liberal Party. He's getting a vibe, I imagine, from across the cross-section, which is unprecedented, that people are just fed up with what's going on.
Catherine Murphy, do you think Turnbull will definitely run if there is a spill open?
Well, obviously the spill's got to get up, and if the spill gets up, then that's a significant vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. I'd be very surprised if Turnbull didn't run if the spill motion got up. But I suppose the big Michelle said chess earlier, didn't she? The big chess play over the next 24 hours is whether the spill can be pushed down in its box. I'd be amazed if Malcolm didn't run in the event of the spill being successful. And in terms of what Mark was saying, appeals. Well, the difficulty for Malcolm Turnbull going forward in the event that he is successful, there are considerable difficulties when parties change leaders, and there are difficulties when there are genuine ideological differences between factional elements in the same party. Now, we should remember, though, that Tony Abbott used to be mocked and disdained by the Liberal Party right. He was seen as basically someone who was bored by economics, someone who wasn't interested in the sorts of issues that the Liberal Party right is generally interested in, apart from social issues, obviously. Tony Abbott had to make his accommodation with the right of the party. In the event that Malcolm Turnbull takes the leadership, he will also have to make his accommodation with the right of the party. That said, I think why people are contemplating a change to Malcolm Turnbull is obviously he's the Liberal Party's strongest centrist candidate. He's a crossover candidate. He can genuinely appeal to swinging voters. He represents an opportunity for the Liberal Party not to be drummed out of office in one term. So there's a sort of basic transaction that's occurring there. But also, and it's interesting to just look carefully at what Malcolm Turnbull said this morning in terms of his appeal to the party and that these are party matters. Essentially, the great complaint under Tony Abbott is that the Prime Minister and his office have sort of entrenched a command and control structure in the Liberal Party. That's not generally the way the Liberal Party does business. It's usually a more finessing operation than here's your talking points, stick to them. And I don't care if the talking points are different to the ones I gave you yesterday. What Turnbull is in essence doing is appealing to the traditions of the Liberal Party that backbenchers have a say, that cabinet works, that a genuine discussion take place, and that people can be genuinely independent within that structure. And just given the past practice of the last several months, that's quite a powerful appeal to people who feel as though.
Okay, here endeth part one of The Outsiders.